Today we're going to compare two horizontal pressing movements that are basically the exact same movement, just done slightly differently and with slightly different intentions and mechanics. So the first is going to be the flat barbell pin press. So with this movement, the idea here is that you're performing a top end range of motion bench press. So you're not going all the way down to your chest, you're using the pins to actually self-spot, and then you're going to press back up, but you are essentially eliminating that bottom portion of the rep. Then also, we are going to do a barbell floor press. So floor press is basically the same exact thing. You are going to use your elbows and your natural forearm length as that restriction in that range of motion, that barrier there. So even though the movement pattern, the range of motion, the effect on the pecs, the shoulders, the triceps is going to be pretty much the same mechanistically, again, because we are performing them different and using different modalities, different barriers, it is going to actually be pretty different with the loads that you're able to use, but also like the execution, the use cases for both of these movements. So I'll start with flat pin press. So you want to set this up as if you're performing a normal flat bench. The only difference is that as you're bringing it down, instead of bringing it all the way down to your chest, you are going to have those pins that stop the bar about an inch off your chest. Maybe a little bit higher, but about an inch. And then you're gonna press back up. So this is gonna be great for really training your lockout strength. If you have an injury for your shoulder, your pecs, you can work around that. You're gonna be able to overload the movement. Just overall, really interesting use cases whenever you are intentionally restricting your range of motion like this. Coming over to the barbell floor press, one big thing to note is that the range of motion is going to be basically the exact same. So as we get into position here, we are going to set up very similar to how we just did with the pin press, but with floor presses, I like to keep my legs straight rather than having them bent, just because that prevents you from cheating. So here, I'm gonna unrack the bar, bring it out and over, down, pause with your elbows and the back of your arms on the floor, and you're gonna press back up. So both of these movements can be thought of as dead stop movements. Because you're bringing the pin press down to the pins, you're letting it completely unload at the bottom before pressing back up. So you are having to overcome that inertia and regenerate that power output, which is very difficult to do. So a lot of people will be a little bit surprised whenever they try and do pin presses and they realize that they can't do as much load than they could if they were getting a full range of motion. It's not because you're weaker performing less range of motion, it's because that deloading, that dead stop on the pins is actually forcing your muscles to overcome that inertia again, which is much more difficult than maintaining constant tension and just reversing the movement. Similarly, whenever you're performing barbell floor presses, that stop with your elbows on the floor rather than bouncing and maintaining a constant rep speed is going to make the movement much more difficult. But again, you want to continue to do that. You want to make sure that you are controlling it, dead stopping, allowing your arms to settle so that you're not trying to use momentum, not trying to bounce through the movement. You can actually control it. So, like I said at the beginning, these movements are basically the exact same. It's just different application of the same range of motion. So, if you're looking more purely for overloading with a similar bench press pattern, I would advise probably go with the pin press because you're gonna get the same setup as you would with a normal bench. You can have very similar patterning, very similar loading, very similar pressing angles. With the floor press, it is somewhat of a different movement pattern because you have different stability, you have different foundational supports, and also there are just gonna be a few things that are inherently different about the floor press because of that instability and also because you are on the ground rather than on a bench, which is gonna cause a little bit of issues there as well. So being able to apply these across different programs, being able to know when and where to sub in and out, potentially how to actually use a floor press or use a pin press to overcome things like tricep strength issues, injuries, etc., are going to be really, really great applications for each of these movements. But again, wrapping it all up, very similar movement patterns, pretty much the same exact pattern, just different applications.